Hey folks, welcome back to the farm. Thanks for coming hanging out with us here today. We've had a pretty long weekend here on the homestead. Got lots of work done, lots of mowing, lots of bush hogging done. So today is going to be an easier day, and I'll take you around a little bit and bring you up to speed on the garden. I think we're going to have to do some rototilling out here a little bit. And then we're probably going to make some pickled onions, because we have some onions that we need to deal with. So stick around and we'll run you through all that. You can see our grape trellis here. Really like that. We had an issue with our grapevine here in the middle. The main cane died, but we have the plant is still alive down here. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cut this main cane down, and then once these are done growing this year, we'll take one of these very large canes and retrain one to go up. But the other two varieties are doing good, and that trellis makes it a lot easier to deal with. And then some of this lower stuff here we're just going to prune off and throw out here for the next time we mow. We'll chop it up. But you can see Kelly's chocolate mint. It's pretty much just taken over this whole bed down here on the bottom. And we still want to put a border here between the lawn and the bed there. We've already got it mulched, so we don't have too big of a weed problem going on there. Now out here you can see that I've caught up on the strip spray here in the fruit orchard. Still got to go through and do a little maintenance spraying here and there because the weeds were fairly tall. So some of the underlying weeds didn't get hit with the spray, and I have to true up the edges a little bit. They're not very straight for my liking, but the fruit trees are doing fantastic. We're really happy about that we've got all of our spots filled now, because we were struggling there for a while getting the trees to keep going. This peach tree here is our pride and joy out of the whole bunch. Doing fantastic. This is going to be a beautiful tree here. So here's what's left of our vegetable garden, and what's left is doing pretty good, with the exception of the tomatoes we talked about earlier. You can see the mulch here in the row is still doing its job, but we do have a few weeds out here in the walk path, and that's the rototilling we were talking about earlier. We've got a little more weeds down there, but the rototiller will get everything in the walk path. So let's look around a little bit. We have some collards still growing here. I'm hoping these go to seed so I can get seed from these, because I don't know if I can get any more of these. These were sent to us by one of my co-workers, Joe, and we're hoping we can harvest some of the seeds off of this year. We still have one of our little volunteer dill plants going here. Our cucumber, our slicing cucumber, was hit really hard with the hail, but I haven't ripped it out because there's still some flowers growing in here, so maybe it'll put on a couple cucumbers by the end of the year. We might get something off of this, so I haven't ripped it out. The sweet potatoes are going gangbusters out here. We're going to get a handful of sweet potatoes. We've never grown sweet potatoes here, so this is a pretty nice surprise how well they're doing. They were beat down fairly well with the hail too. And then got our stevia here on the end with the marigold. We can harvest some of that stevia. And then here's our indeterminate tomatoes. Our sweet 100s on this end down here, and then we have some of our slicing tomatoes down here further. Those have got to ripen up a little bit. You can see we have some down here in the bottom that are starting to turn. It's been a slow tomato year this year because the temperatures just have not been warm. Now we're supposed to get some warm temperatures coming up the latter part of this week. We're going to get into high 90s and hundreds. So And then here's our sad Roma tomatoes we've been picking little by little. We'll get another couple batches out of here that we'll put in the canner. Here's our squash row. You can see it's really going gangbusters. And we've got some butternut squash that we're going to be able to harvest. They're all through here. There's a giant one right there. Butternut always does well here, and even though it got hammered by the hail, came back. And then our watermelon ceased to exist, which I'm going to have to plant them further apart next year because watermelon would have been overrun by the squash and the cantaloupe. So we'll have to spread out even a little bit more next year. This is our cantaloupe. It's got some flowers all over it, so I'm sure we're going to get some melons as long as everything goes right here in the latter part of the season. We'll probably get 20-30 melons out of this patch here. And then our acorn squash, you can see that's a smaller specimen there, but here's some larger ones here. This will be full of acorn squash, and those will store well into the winter. And our peppers have really started coming on here in the latter part of the season. They struggled just like the tomatoes with the cool weather and the moist weather we've been having, but it looks like they're coming out of it. And we had got some more blossoms after the hail knocked all of them off. So we've got high hopes over here. Look at these plants here, almost 2 feet tall. So that's nice that they're bouncing back. So while it's cool this morning, let's go get that rototiller out and we'll knock out these walk paths real quick. We've got a pretty good withdrawal from our seed bank, our wheat seed bank going on out here, so we'll take care of it. So I think while we till, we're going to give these fruit trees a shot of water because we've only been getting water about a ½ inch at a time. So we'll come over here, turn our fruit trees on, and then down here we turn the garden off. Now all we have to do is turn our hydrant on over here that's getting a little hidden in here in the weeds. We're going to have to chop all this down. Alright, we've checked all the emitters, everything's flowing. We've had a lot less problems since we went to these plug resistant emitters. This half of the system runs all of the fruit orchard, the grapevines, everything around the chicken coop, and we put a new line over to underneath the windmill where we planted our climbing rows over there. So let's get this rototiller fired up and start turning some dirt. I think our onions are about dry enough to get cleaned up, wipe the dirt off of them, and get them into the root cellar here fairly soon. We've been just coming out here and grabbing them as needed. We found a couple here and there that have shown some rot, like I think this one here we'll have to get rid of, but not too bad. But these aren't the onions we're going to pickle later. We'll show you those. Let rototiller make short work of the walk paths. Give yourself plenty of room, folks. Give yourself some wide rows where you can get in there and work. Now, my last garden I had out in California, we had a half-acre garden, and we left it wide enough where we could use the tractor to go in between the rows, and we gardened with a tractor. So if you've got the space and don't have to worry about deer coming into your garden, and you don't have to have it all fenced in, make it wide enough so you can use your tractor if you have one. Could have done this with the wheel hoe, but I wanted to use that rototiller because I recently got it back from the shop. It needed a couple of repairs, and I wanted to do a little test drive. All right, we're cooling off and rehydrating a little bit here in the grain bin. You can hear the rototiller running in the background. I leave it running over there until it runs out of fuel. Now, a lot of people, when they're having issues with their power equipment, 99% of the time it's because of old gas. It stays in there and gums up the carburetor, and then your equipment's not going to run for you. And with the exception of diesel equipment like tractors and stuff like that, always run them out of fuel and use fresh gas, and you won't have that issue. We weed sprayed around our culverts here when we did all of our weed spray to get this grass to die. So today I figured we'd come out and burn it real quick and clear this culvert out. The weeds get so plugged in here, and then when it snows it plugs over and then it turns to ice, and then our culvert is plugged. We had a big bunch of water coming through here this last year, and we had to chip through the ice. So we're trying to avoid that issue this year. Gonna burn this one out right now. Anytime you're burning on a windy day, you want to make sure to start the fire downwind, so it'll burn upwind. It'll burn a lot slower. Not that we're going to have an issue because everything's nice and green around here, but it's just safer to do it that way. Always have a shovel where you can put little spot fires out if you get them, but again, it won't be an issue with all the green grass. All right, let's go in and take care of them onions we need to take care of. So we've got this bucket of onions here. If you remember the leftover onion sets we had, the little bulbs, we planted a bunch of those for green onions. But we didn't use all the green onions, so they ended up bulbing up. So we're going to use these bulbs. We're going to clean up all the these onions, get the dirt off of them, cut the tops off of them, and then we'll get them in the house and pickle them. We got all our onions rinsed, and now we're trimming and slicing the onions. Got a bowl going over here. It's our waste bowl. Now, I don't know if y'all knew, there's a way to slice onions that they don't come apart as easy. I don't know if you've ever experienced slicing onions and you get down towards the end and all the layers want to come apart. So if you slice the onion top to bottom or north to south, and then turn the onion on its side after you cut it in half, and then slice it north to south again instead of this way, the onion doesn't fall apart, and it's much easier to slice that way. Got our big bowl of sliced onions. If you're hypersensitive to onions or cutting onions, you should probably do that outside. Kelly gets home, it's probably going to hit her like a brick. But what we want to do now is turn our faucet on hot and let it heat up. We have scalding hot water here. I have our hot water heater turned all the way up. If you don't have hot enough water, go ahead and heat some on the stove. And we want to put enough water, hot water in here to cover this. And it'll help soften the onions up a little bit, and it'll take some of the really green, pungent flavor out of them. And then we'll drain them right before we put them in the jars. You want to let them soak for about 20 minutes. All right, to fill your jars, you don't have to get fancy and get out funnels and all that stuff. I just grab the jar and I stuff as much onions as I can get into the jar with my bare hands up to our head space here. And then to rinse them, turn on your cold water, fill your jar full of cold water, and then dump out your jar again. Just kind of run it through your fingers, let it strain, and then when the water is done running out, your onions have been rinsed, and then just set it on the counter here next to the sink until we get all the jars full. Just like that. Ended up with 12 pints, and then a little baggie full of onions. We're going to use probably half of those for dinner and put the other half in the freezer for whatever we make next. I got the lids just sitting on there to keep the onion smell down here in the kitchen. You can see we had one purple onion in the whole mix, and that little bit of purple will add just a little bit of color to those jars that have some in it. So now we can make the brine. The last jar that I dumped out after rinsing, I dumped into a measuring cup to see what we had in it, and it came out to just under a cup. So we're going to figure on 12 cups of brine to put into those jars. Our brine for our pickled onions could not be simpler. Since we have 12 pints and there's about a cup of brine in each pint, that's going to give us 12 cups of brine. So we'll do 6 cups of white vinegar. You can use cider vinegar if you like, or whatever kind of vinegar you like. And then 6 cups of water, half and half. So that makes it real easy, right? So for every cup of brine, you need a half a teaspoon of salt. So we have 12 cups of brine liquid in here. So that would give us 12 half teaspoons, or 6 whole teaspoons, or 2 whole tablespoons, which are a lot easier to measure if you know your conversions. Got our good Redmond sea salt in there. Next thing is equal part of sugar. So we're going to go with 2 tablespoons of sugar as well. 1, 2, and that's all that's going in our brine pot. So while your brine is heating on the stove, get you some whole peppercorns and put 3 whole peppercorns in each jar. If you don't like pepper, you don't have to put that in there. It's just up to you. You could use crushed red pepper. You could use any flavors you want, actually. So sky's the limit. We're going to start filling our hot jars with the brine right out of the pot. We'll come up to the top where the head space is supposed to be, and we'll be good to go. We get pretty close on our brine, and we got our 12 jars in our canner. Now when that comes to a boil, we're going to process those for 15 minutes because we're at a little higher elevation here. It'd be 10 minutes if you were at sea level, and that's for pint jars. It would be more for quarts, but it's easy to look up on the internet what you need if you don't know. There's our 12 jars of pickled onions, all canned up and sealed. Everything's sealed up 100%. Now most people, when they can onions, they can purple onions, and they turn a really pretty pink color when you can them, and they look really nice on any dish you use them on. But you can use any onions you want. It comes out the same flavor. So we already had dinner, and Kelly's gone to bed because she's working tomorrow, and we're going to call it a day. It's been quite a long day. So thanks for hanging around with me today. So till next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We love you guys. We'll see you on the next one.